It's very, very hard to go out and set out your stall saying, I want to do things differently. Things need to be changed because it's an inherent criticism of the way his father's doing things. So then directly relating it to your father would be quite awkward, I think. So he's on...
Is it a deliberate omission, do you think?
I think it's very difficult for him to talk about his father's reign at the same time as setting out his stall.
Yeah.
So but it is notable by his absence that he doesn't really talk about the king.
This is The Royals with me, Roya and Kate.
And me, Kate Mancy, from The Times and The Sunday Times.
Every so often, a royal moment lands that feels important. A point in time where what happens next feels different to what's come before. And, in the words of Prince William about the royal family, it's about change and no longer being overwhelmed by history. And he might just be signalling major change for the monarchy.
Yes, in a quietly disarming TV interview, Prince William has delivered his clearest vision yet about what his values are and the nature of the reign he intends to lead when he becomes king.
It didn't come in a press release or a palace briefing, but in a simple, unlikely conversation that some may see as entertainment, but reads and sounds almost like a manifesto for change, a determined break from the past.
Because within the jokes and William whizzing around Windsor Castle on his scooter, Prince William is laying out a direction of travel that diverges from the past, from that of his father and his late grandmother. And in his words, I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
It's described as the ultimate bucket list. Apple TV's The Reluctant Traveller, with actor, writer and comedian Eugene Levy of Schitt's Creek fame. He travels the world, and in this episode, he meets Prince William.
Welcome to London!
Never felt more like a tourist. Thank you. Why don't you pop down to the castle, William, from the Prince of Wales? Your Royal Highness.
Nice to see you. We provide this service for everyone. We do personalised tours everywhere.
What do you do when you're home?
Sleep.
Really?
When you've got 3 small children, sleep was an important part of my life. I'd say 2024 was the hardest year I've ever had. You know, life is sent to test us as well, and being able to overcome that is what makes us who we are.
Eugene is there for a tour of Windsor Castle, and His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales is his personal tour guide, with the Prince making his entrance on an electric scooter, saying it gets around quite nicely. It's quite fun.
And there's a great deal of laughter, but there's also a lot of discussion about how William sees both his life and his role. And remember, William does very few interviews. He chooses his words very carefully.
Now, some of this has already been revealed in teaser clips and trailers, but now it's here for all to see. Roya, what do you think it showed about a confident prince ready to accept the responsibility of office? We've got an heir to the throne throwing down the gauntlet, offering to ask real questions, saying he's going to make changes. What did you make of it all?
It was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I thought he had so carefully, although it was very unscripted, and it comes from the unscripted department of Apple, which was fascinating, I felt there were things that he wanted to put down on record. There were responses to Eugene Levy's questions that felt as if it was William saying, this is who I am and who I'm going to be as king. And I thought that line about tradition, given that he was walking around Windsor Castle with all its, 1,000-year-old tradition, but talking a lot about the future and what he wants to do, was sort of very evocative of, as he said, a future monarch being not wanting to be anchored down or rooted by tradition, but preparing people, his future subjects, for what's coming. Yeah. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everything about it said change, didn't it? And I think he's talking about change on 2 fronts. So he's talking about how to change the royal family as an institution. He's going to ask questions. He's not going to be beholden or weighed down by the past. He's going around laughing at the armour of Henry VIII at one point, saying, goodness, he was actually quite a small man despite having this kind of being a big historical figure that looms large in history. And he's almost making light of that, saying, but at the same time, he wants to keep tradition. So he's talking about how he's going to change the institution of the royal family, but then on a second point, saying how he wants to change the royal family on a very nuclear level. And we'll come on to that. I mean, he talks about the past his childhood and how that differs, hopefully, he says, quite differently for his children. He doesn't want to make the mistakes that his father did.
Very personal, that bit of the conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah. So there's two things going on here, isn't there? There's a personal, his personal journey, his personal family, and then the institution, his role as head of state. And this is him kind of coming into his own skin. I mean, it was so revelatory. It was extraordinary, and he's chosen not to do it with the BBC. He's not chosen to go down the kind of the traditional routes. He's not doing the Jonathan Dimbleby interview that his father did once. This is something different. It's a comedian from a sitcom.
I thought it was very arresting that notion of change by just arriving on an electric scooter through into the quadrangle of the 1,000-year-old Windsor Castle. It's like, okay, the notion that King Charles would ever go anywhere near an electric scooter. I mean, he loves his electric cars. That was the sort of tone setter, wasn't it, for the rest of the conversation. I think let's pick up on one of the first really arresting quotes where he talked about Eugene Levy sort of said, doesn't all this sort of history overwhelm you? And he said, it's not history that overwhelms me. There are other things that overwhelm me. When it's about the family and there are family worries, that is what sometimes overwhelms me. And I thought that was fascinating because he got quite personal quite quickly, didn't he?
He did. He came prepared. He came open. And I think that was really interesting because we later learn from an aide, what he's talking about there is his wife's illness, obviously Kate's cancer treatment that she had last year. And he said the family stuff, that's what overwhelms him. And that's the thing that really can get to him. Being king one day, he said, in the past, he did used to wake up and think, whoa, are we actually doing this? And they were his words. But he's sort of come around to the idea that that's all fine. And any curveballs that come his way in terms of his public role, in terms of his job, he's now equipped to deal with that. That's what he's telling us. But the family stuff, he said, that really felt like the rug was being pulled out. The metaphorical rug was being quickly pulled out from underneath my feet, he said at one point.
We asked questions after the screening, didn't we? What was he, what's he referring to there? And his press secretary, very keen to say he's just talking about, his father's illness and his wife's illness. But there is no way that people watching William say, what really overwhelms me is when, is the family worries. People are going to look at him and go, you're someone who's had 2 major illnesses in your family, your wife and your father. But all the issues with your brother, there's no way, I think, I certainly watched him say that, and he might not have said the words Prince Harry, but I looked at him and thought, your family worries are also about your brother. It's been very distressing for the whole family, what's gone on in the last few years with Harry, and for Harry.
Yeah, you're right. And there is only one point in the whole kind of 42-minute programme where he mentions Harry, and that's when he's talking about that kind of shared upbringing.
Yeah.
And that was interesting because that did feel a little bit like an olive branch where he's saying, me and Harry had a terrible time growing up in terms of the public scrutiny and the media. And this is something as well that comes up, isn't it? That it's obviously an open sore, the scrutiny that his parents were subjected to.
That word he used, insatiable. The insatiable media back in the 80s.
Were insatiable, yeah. And now, he's saying, hopefully we've moved on. But when he was talking about that, that's when he referenced, for the first time we've ever heard him talk about it, all that lurid speculation that was going on online last year when we knew the Princess of Wales had had surgery, but there was no more information coming out of the palace. In that void, all sorts of conspiracy theories sprang up, and that he does actually address that, and he links that back to his childhood and that kind of media scrutiny,
wanting to be inside everywhere and know everything,
and then talking about being grown up with the media now, knowing that he's got a role to play. And this is his concession. It's not the BBC sit down where he gets grilled by Jeremy Paxman. This is his concession where he's doing it on his own terms, giving a little bit away, being as open as I think we've ever seen him in terms of what his reign's going to look like.
I thought the phrase there when he was talking, twofold. When he mentioned how difficult what things were last year and everything that was going on, he said, it made doing the job quite hard. It made just carrying on and sort of doing the job when all of this was going on last year, all the speculation around the Princess of Wales before they'd announced she had cancer. And then when he, linked it back, as you said, to his parents and, the wild west of the insatiable media in the 80s and early 90s when his parents' marriage was breaking down. And he talked about the fact that His parents divorced at 8. The period of safety and comfort and stability for him, he said, ended when he was very young. And he said, that can affect you. I know that can affect you when you're,
Yeah, he says, I know the drama and the stress of that.
And I felt there was
you as an adult.
a little bit of a reference to Prince Harry there as well, acknowledging that they both had difficult childhoods and perhaps Harry's made some decisions based on that. And I thought what was really interesting as well was during the dog walk, when they were walking with his dog, Orla, and Eugene Levy was asking him, is your job 9 to 5? Now, William's workload is something that William and his team are constantly battling speculation and criticism about. People have called him work shy in the past. People sometimes suggest he should be doing more engagements visibly, regardless of what he does behind the scenes. And he was very clear. And I thought this was something he felt he wanted to say.
He came with his cards ready to play, didn't he? Yeah.
He said, it's not 9 to 5. I do a lot behind the scenes, but it's really important to me that I do the school run. I give them a really stable present because I'm setting them up for the future. And if you don't have that in the present, you're setting them up for a fall in the future. And that kind of felt like he was talking about, his own childhood.
He's grappled a lot of demons, hasn't he?
It was him putting that down, wasn't it? Saying, this is my decision. You can think what you like, but we're raising the children and we're going to be present parents for as long as possible.
And these are the two things combined again, isn't it? How he's running his nuclear royal family, how he's running the royal family as the institution. They're one and the same, of course, but in terms of that role versus his role as dad, it's very difficult balancing that work-life balance. It's interesting where he talks about how they're raising the kids as well. He says, we're very strict. We don't let them have mobile phones.
Yeah.
They do a lot of sports. He talks about Louis and Charlotte beating each other up on the trampoline. He talks about George and his hockey. And
strict. He said they're quite strict about the phones. That's interesting because I suspect George and Charlotte at their age are probably...
I've got an 11-year-old who doesn't have a phone, but there are plenty of 12-year-olds like Prince George who are certainly going up to secondary schools who do have phones.
One of his great fears, I know William's great fears, is the social media age and what it's going to be like is when George comes of age and is photographed much more and is followed much more in terms of sort of media interest, and the social media age of George being out and about and photographed and filmed. I know that plays on his mind. You can't really put that off by, withholding phones from them, but it's coming and you can sort of see how he's thinking about it.
Yeah. This is the whole thing, is you can see the cogs turning in William's mind throughout the whole thing, can't you? And there's one point where he's talking about what sort of king he will be, talking about change, asking questions like we discussed. But then he's asked, well, what do you think about, Prince George when he becomes king? And he said, well, that's a big question. That's an interesting question. I want it to be a role that my son is proud of.
Yes.
So he's already thinking of
I've got
King
to make
George.
the change for an institution that's fit for purpose that he takes on and what actually wants to do.
Yeah.
There's a question over... It's interesting, isn't it?
So much to say about this. I mean, the news revelations just come thick and fast, really.
In terms of sort of the quote where he's talking about... Eugene Levy says there's quite a lot of change there coming then, isn't there? And he says, yes, but change for good. I thought it was interesting how he sort of dripped that line of not radical change, but making sure it's fit for purpose. These things that we've heard briefed out before. I want to ask the questions. And it's sort of him saying, during his grandmother's time and a lot during his father's time, things have happened because they have always happened. Questions have been asked by courtiers. What did we do last time?
Well, we're doing that because that's how it's always been done.
Exactly.
And he says...
Not under my reign, not going forwards.
Well, you talk about the late Queen and the current king. Now, there's someone who is, as well as Harry, who's only really briefly mentioned once, although we get the sense of Harry throughout some of what he's saying about his childhood. The king isn't really mentioned at all. He talks about in the pub scene, he talks about, wanting to protect his family. He talks about Kate's illness and the king's illness, saying, well, the king, my father can sort of protect himself. But we don't, apart from hearing that he doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past,
He's not really in there, is he?
The king is not really in there.
What do you make of that?
Take from that what you will. I mean, it's very, very hard to go out and set out your stall saying, I want to do things differently. Things need to be changed because it's an inherent criticism of the way his father's doing things. So then directly relating it to your father would be quite awkward, I think. So he's on...
Is it a deliberate omission, do you think?
I think it's very difficult for him to talk about his father's reign at the same time as setting out his stall.
Yeah.
So, but he is notable by his absence, that he doesn't really talk about the king. You know, he's on much safer territory talking about his late grandmother, isn't
Yeah.
he? He points out the window to Eton College and says, oh, look, that was where I went to school. I used to wander over here. She had the best teas. You know, we got on really well, particularly as she got older. And my grandparents got... It's interesting. This is another thing.
Yeah.
Families will all... There's loads of things in here that all families will link to as personal experience. You know, as people get older, they get more relaxed, but
Yes.
more informal. They come around to
That was interesting.
the younger
him
generation's way of doing things.
talking about the evolution of that relationship with his grandmother, because I think there's a sort of inherent view that, you know, William and his grandmother were always very, very close. But actually, in private, he said before, that wasn't always the case. And he says it on the record here. He says, when I was younger, it was much more formal. And it got better as they were in their 80s. And I grew up and we sort of understood each other more and we were more aligned. And I think there's also, he tries to set that family scene much more. You know, we were here a lot in Windsor. It's where her horses were. We came, we saw her kind of a lot. Because I think a lot of people think the Queen was a slightly remote family figure, but actually everyone who knew her very well and her family would say at heart of it, public figure, but private figure. She was a family woman who liked being in the country with her family. And he sort of sets that scene, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he does through the whole thing, doesn't he? 'Cause he brings Windsor Castle to life, not just for the history of it all, but also as a family home. There's one point where they're walking through St George's Hall and he said, we used to run down here and get splinters in our feet from the wooden halls, as you know, me and my cousins. Oh no, my children now, they've got a carpet down, so it's much easier for them. I love that that's the kind of the royal equivalent of, they don't know how good they've got it, these youngsters, you know.
Yeah.
The royal youngsters nowadays have carpet down. They don't get splinters in their feet running around St George's Hall like we used to do. But he does bring to life this idea of it as a home and setting out his stall that he ain't come back to London. You know,
No.
he wants to stay in Windsor. They're just moving out of Adelaide Cottage into Forest Lodge nearby. Him linking himself to the history of Windsor Castle is very clever, I think, in this. He's telling the world, look, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm about.
What do you think in terms of sort of when he was talking about the family issues? I was so struck by the quotes about family and family problems and curveballs overwhelming him beyond almost anything else. Because if I was William, I would think, you know, gosh, the next role that's coming, and who knows when it's coming, long live the king, but the king is still battling cancer 19 months past diagnosis. That role is at some point on his nearish horizon. That, I would imagine, is very daunting. But to say that that's not what he wakes up every day worrying about more, that it's actually family problems, and I would inference from that discord, is that him saying life would have been easier if I hadn't had all of that, if I had my brother around? He says that they've been very lucky so far they hadn't had much illness until his father and wife got ill. I was so fascinated by that being the thing he picked out as what overwhelms him, given he has a very stable family.
I suppose that's the thing that he can't control, isn't it? There's so much of the family element that he can't control. The job is one thing, and he's now secure enough in that he can do it. But you're right. I think, you know, clearly there's a lot that weighs on his mind. You know, he doesn't wake up thinking, oh, one day I'm going to be king. What's that going to be like? Although it obviously overawed him as a child. But the family's, the family element is there. But I didn't think he comes across as somebody who is older than his years, slightly jaded by his experience. But, you know, he does sound convincing when he says he's optimistic about the future.
Yeah. I thought what's interesting as well is the constant messaging we get from his team in Kensington Palace about, you know, what he wants to do domestically, homelessness and the environment. But we always get that global statesman thing, don't we? The global statesman thing on the international stage,
Urgent
meeting
optimism.
presidents and prime ministers and heads of state. And I thought this was a very deliberate choice by William to turn up in his shacket, on his scooter,
Shacket.
in his trainers. It's a very informal...
No helmet.
It's
Tut-tut.
a very informal chat in the pub, on a dog walk, having a pint of cider. Apple TV, potentially a global audience of 1 billion, potentially when that drops on Friday morning. And I thought that was a very concerted messaging from him. This is the other side of me. This is the informal side of me. I want you to see it. I want you to understand it as much as the global statesman and me on the balcony, me at the coronation, and me kissing my
I'm the
father.
guy you can go to the pub with, because that's the world that we're in.
That's the future.
That's what people want to vote for. And although he doesn't need votes, he's going to have to bring the public along with him. Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. That's the kind of the informal William, isn't it? That he jokes in the pub about when he was at St Andrews University and his mates used to try and get round all 45 of the town's pubs in the one pub crawl on one day. He didn't mention if him and Kate were partaking in that little pub crawl.
I bet he
but,
did.
You know,
One pint Willie.
The kind of sneaky smell. Well, interesting. I spoke to Eugene Levy after he'd done this. I interviewed him, and he said that he didn't even finish that pint, first of all. He said that he was too busy chatting and he met his wife and things like that. But I said to him, essentially Levy comes across as this, you think he's going to be this sort of bumbling sitcom character like we see on screen on American Pie, as William says he loves the American Pie movies, and Schitt's Creek. But he's actually like this softly spoken Jeremy Paxman. He gets a lot out of him, and he gets he's landed a big scoop. So I said, what did you make of what you think? And he said, well, he remembers, he's 78, he remembers watching on television Queen Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953. He's old enough to remember that.
He says that to William as well.
Yeah.
It's charming.
And then he says, but what we're seeing now, I came away with a sense that we're going to see a kind of monarchy that the world has never seen before. And that's what he took home from that sort of interview. And I think he's right. I think, it's so clever. They say it's unscripted, and I'm sure it was unscripted, but that's not to say that there wasn't a lot of negotiation and thought process that went around the messaging of William at the palace.
Yeah, of course.
So for so long, we've seen William and Kate, so perfect, never put a foot wrong. And actually, that's not always what you need in terms of PR. You need to see
the human side.
Who is this person? They can't be 2D anymore. They have to be three-dimensional. And that's what we're seeing here, this informality that you spoke about.
A real drive there to get across, this is who we are, underneath the constitutional roles that you see on the balcony, at the set pieces, at trooping, at the cenotaph, at remembrance. It's like, if you're going to come with me into the next reign, which is really, this was a window into it, understanding who I am and why I'm making decisions now with me and my family for the future. And this is kind of what you can expect down the line. And it's not going to be the same as what's come before.
Well, let's remember, so Christopher Guy got his knighthood, didn't he? The late Queen's private secretary. Knighthood for services to the transition, because there was so much thought process that went on. What would happen when Charles became king? And of course, those conversations are taking place now with William.
They were happening before with the king and queen.
Exactly.
Late queen.
Yeah, precisely. So this is all kind of manoeuvring in that way. I mean, there's one point where he says, Eugene, should we go outside? I'd like you to meet. And we're all thinking, oh, Kate's turned up. And
it's the dog.
It's the dog.
It's Ola. Not to say she doesn't have a star turn, but
I said to someone at the palace, was there any consideration that Kate might take part? And they said, oh, no, this is his, it's his day, it's his thing. And I think that's probably the right way to play it, PR-wise.
I agree.
It's him telling.
It's his show. It's his show.
It's very good. It's very well done. I think it'll go down very well. And like you say, it's a global audience too. A Canadian actor, let's not forget the Commonwealth.
Well, he gets that right in there, doesn't he? If you see Eugene Levy, he's there on the London bus before he goes to Windsor, and he's talking about the fact that he's from Canada, and growing up in school, every day they would swear the oath of allegiance and sing God Save the Queen. And it's quite weird, that, isn't it? And then he's going to see William, who you get the idea, well, we know he's not going to have any of that, his coronation. He's not going to have a homage of the people. Not so much about kind of swearing allegiance to the monarch. It's more like, come with me if you want to come with me. This is what it's going to look like.
Come and have a pint. You don't need to stand up and hand on chest and
Yeah.
So this has been a long time in the planning. It was filmed in February. And at the beginning, we see a hand-signed note from William being delivered to the Goring Hotel where Eugene Levy is staying. And the date is 31st of January. So this has been a long time since it was filmed. And even last year, they would have been having lots of negotiations about this. So how did it all come about?
Well, I think there's a key figure here in the background who viewers won't hear from, but who I know when we did meet yesterday, called Alison Kirkham, who's head of unscripted at Apple TV. And she's someone who William knows very well and who he really trusts. Alison some listeners and viewers might remember, he did a really interesting thing with Apple called A Time to Walk, which was sort of a podcast, but not quite a podcast.
Quite revelatory.
And
listening to AC/DC with the kids.
Walking around Sandringham in Norfolk with a sort of desert island disc style, choosing certain tracks that he really loves and talking about how they relate to his life, past and present. And Alison was involved in that and sort of oversaw that. And he knows Alison of old because she used to be at the BBC. She used to be very heavily involved in the big royal set piece moments, whether that was big interviews with the royal family or state occasions. So she is someone that he and his team really trust. And for all Eugene Levy's fame and however much William might love him in his films and Schitt's Creek, I think if it wasn't for Alison overseeing this, I don't think it would have happened. It is all about trust with him and his team.
It's all about contacts and personal connection, isn't it? Well, Apple's had a very good run with the royal family.
Yeah.
Tim Cook was the CEO, was part of the royal procession, wasn't he?
Yes.
At the state banquet.
Yes.
When Trump came over.
With all the tech bros. And I think I suspect they can't quite believe their luck in terms of what they got.
The King did a podcast as well, didn't he? He did like a Christmas podcast with Apple.
Yes, exactly.
Not to be left out.
The King choosing his Christmas playlist. But I think they will have come to William and his team saying, look, we've done all this great work before. Where else can we take it? There have been murmurings and pieces and, recently about the future, what's coming down the line. And there have definitely been things that William has wanted to have an outing with, as his team would say, to start flagging, to start talking about. And I suppose it will have gone from there. And I think with William knowing he's in safe hands, and there's an element of control with that in terms of, you can keep doing it until you get where you want to go, however natural you want it to look. But I know that they are delighted because, as we've seen today and this week, it has dominated the royal coverage. And I think that's a great thing too, just in the nick of time, because the coverage has been up and down the last few weeks and months, as it always has been, hasn't it?
It's also not a conversation you want to be having when the King's seriously ill.
Yeah.
If that moment comes, we don't know what the future holds. But this, in a way, is getting the public ready for the kind of next transition in a safe way. Yes,
while things are stable. And the King's still out there with a very full diary, doing his thing, engagements up in Scotland this week, doing his thing. So I agree. I think it's very clever timing.
Messaging, yeah.
Do you think, Kate, in terms of us having to discuss that, I felt, we've both felt that there are things William came and wanted to say and put down on record, maybe to change some perceptions of him that he might feel people have, misconceptions or sort of conceptions based on fake news. Do you think it will change anyone's mind about any elements of his life and how he leads his life?
I think it will inform people. I mean, you and I, obviously, around and about the palace and the castle all the time. So
yeah, all the time.
Just what's happening with him.
Second home.
But we see it in a way that other people don't. So I think people coming to this and watching this, there's a point at the beginning of the programme where Eugene Levy says, we've seen him grow up, and they show lots of montage of him as a baby.
We feel we know him.
Diana. But do we actually know him? And I think most people probably don't know this William. I was speaking to someone at the palace and they said, this actually is the first time I've seen on screen the guy that I speak to every day, that I have meetings with every day, in the way that he is most natural. And, as he says he wants to be, he doesn't want it to be, William says doesn't want it to be a role that he puts on. It's a role, it's him authentic
it's the role
self,
he lives.
as he's, is the kind of buzzword of the age, isn't it? But, that's what you've got to show to people. I mean, what did you think? Do you think this will change people's view of him?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I hear about William is very often when people say, what are they like? What's William like? What's Harry
like? Really
what's Kate like
behind the scenes?
I then hear people say, oh, well, he's not so fun as he is his brother. He's the more serious one. I think you do get that, but I think it will change people's minds in terms of seeing that he can be quite relaxed and extremely honest when it's one-on-one.
He's funny as well. Let's give it to him. He does crack some good jokes.
You see a bit of that. And I think people will understand that there's a more relaxed side of William, which you don't see very often or doesn't always come across when he's on manoeuvres, but it's there and it's informing a lot of his thinking and it's informing a lot of his decision making about now and the future and the tone of what that reign will look like. And the tone of that reign is not going to be jeans and trainers when he's doing the king stuff, but it's a huge part of him. So it is going to inform, you know, the reign of King William V. It's not going to be as stuffy potentially as his father and his grandmother because they are of another generation. It's him saying, I'm of the next generation. This is what's coming.
Yeah, and he's saying he's excited about change, and I think he wants other people to get excited about the change, not be fearful of it. Come along with him on his scooter journey.
Come along on the scooter ride with me.
Yeah. Are you optimistic?
I am optimistic. I'm generally a very optimistic person, especially when I'm with someone like you, Eugene. You know, life is sent to test us as well, and it definitely can be challenging at times. And being able to overcome that is what makes us who we are. I'm so proud of my wife and my father for how they've handled all of last year. My children have managed brilliantly as well.
Well, I'm hoping every other prince I run into is as nice, open, and human as you.
So there we have it. Big message, unusual vehicle. But we heard William balance tradition with change and speak openly and candidly about the pressures of being in the royal family.
And all of it set against a volatile fortnight. Within the past 2 weeks, we've seen the king lead the family and his soldiers up to the top of the hill at Windsor and a successful state visit with President Trump.
And then almost as soon as that triumph was over, Prince Harry accused the men in grey suits at the palace of sabotaging the reconciliation he has with his father. And the not-so-grand Duke and Duchess of York brought the whole thing crashing back to earth with a resounding Epstein revelation.
It's been made clear the Duke and Duchess are expected to do the honourable thing and fade unceremoniously into the background, becoming invisible.
And then this comes along. It's as if William has arrived in the nick of time to bring new hope for the monarchy. And if this was William's mission statement, it's come at just the right time.
And judging from the reaction in America, audiences are suitably charmed, aren't they, Kate?
Yes, one says, I love Prince William's sense of humour. He's a wonderful man.
Another one says, I loved this interview. It's so wonderful to hear Prince William's, in capitals, wonderful voice.
Another, it keeps coming. Prince William is great. Good sense of humour.
Another one said, the future King of England comes across as warm, genuine, caring. I think the palace and the future king will see that as a good result.
Indeed. If you want to get in touch, you can email us at theroyals@thetimes.co.uk.
Until next time, bye, Kate.
Bye, Roya.